In a federal courtroom, the largest beverage company on the planet made one of the strangest arguments in the history of advertising. Coca-Cola was being sued over the way it marketed a drink called Vitaminwater. And to defend itself, its own lawyers stood up and argued that no reasonable person could ever have been fooled into thinking Vitaminwater was actually healthy. Think about that for a second. To win the case, the company had to publicly tear down the exact promise it had spent hundreds of millions of dollars convincing the world to believe. This is the story of how a bottle of sugar water became a $4 billion empire by selling a feeling instead of a product. How it made a rapper an estimated $100 million along the way, and what happened when someone finally forced the company to admit, in open court, what was really inside the bottle. To understand the trick, you have to go back to the late 1990s, to a company most people have never heard of, a small New York outfit called Energy Brands, better known as Glasso. Its founder, Darius Bekoff, had a deceptively simple idea. Take ordinary water, add a few cheap vitamins and a lot of sugar, give it a bright color and a clever name, and sell it for around $2 a bottle. Right around the year 2000, that idea became Vitaminwater, and it more or less invented an entire category, enhanced water. Now, the genius here was never the liquid. The liquid was, chemically speaking, not far from soda. The genius was the marketing, and specifically a technique that would go on to define the next 2 decades of the food industry: the health halo. Everything about Vitaminwater was engineered to make you feel like you were doing something good for your body. It sat in the cooler next to the bottled water, not next to the cola. The flavors weren't called grape or berry. They were called things like defense, energy, focus, revive, and rescue. Names that sounded less like drinks and more like prescriptions. The labels made cheerful promises. One read, "Vitamins plus water equals all you need." Another suggested the right blend of vitamins could keep you healthy as a horse. None of it was framed as a soft drink. It was framed as wellness you could sip. And the economics were beautiful. Water is nearly free. The vitamins cost very little. Yet a bottle sold at the price of a premium soda, which meant the profit margins were enormous. The early 2000s were the perfect moment for it too. Bottled water was booming. Low carb and wellness diets were everywhere. And millions of people wanted something that felt healthier than soda, but more interesting than plain water. Vitaminwater slid neatly into that gap. Then came the masterstroke. In 2004, Glasso cut a deal with the rapper 50 Cent. Instead of paying him a flat fee to appear in ads, they gave him an ownership stake and built a flavor around him called Formula 50. It was one of the earliest examples of a celebrity taking equity instead of a paycheck, and it turned out to be one of the smartest moves any musician has ever made, because the brand was about to get very, very valuable. By 2007, Vitaminwater had gone from $1 million in sales in its first year to over $1 billion. It was the top-selling water brand in the country, and the biggest beverage company on earth came calling. In May of 2007, Coca-Cola bought energy brands for $4.1 billion in cash, calling Vitaminwater the icon of active lifestyles. When that deal closed, 50 Cent's stake reportedly paid out somewhere around $100 million. A handful of vitamins, a lot of sugar, and a brilliant story had just produced one of the great paydays in beverage history. There was only one problem with the story. It wasn't really true. Here is what was actually in the bottle. A 20-ounce Vitaminwater contained around 32 grams of sugar. That is roughly 8 teaspoons. For comparison, a 12-ounce can of regular Coca-Cola has about 39 grams. So this product, sitting on the healthy side of the store, marketed with words like defense and revive, was carrying very nearly as much sugar as a can of Coke in a bigger bottle. And there was a quiet trick that kept most people from noticing. The label listed the sugar as about 13 grams per serving, which sounds modest. But a single bottle contained roughly 2.5 servings. Almost nobody drinks a third of a bottle and screws the cap back on. People drank the whole thing, and with it, the full 8 teaspoons of sugar, all while believing they were making the healthy choice. That was the entire engine of the brand. The gap between what the marketing implied and what the nutrition label actually said. For years, that gap went unchallenged. Then, in January of 2009, a consumer advocacy group called the Center for Science in the Public Interest filed a class action lawsuit against Coca-Cola. Their argument was blunt. They alleged the company's health claims were false, misleading, and deceptive, and in some cases, crossed the line into outright fraud. The claims they pointed to were genuinely striking for a sugary drink. Marketing that suggested Vitaminwater could support healthy joints, boost immune function, and even reduce the risk of eye disease. Those, the group argued, were the kinds of claims you would expect on a pharmaceutical, not a flavored water. There is actually a name for the principle at stake here. Regulators sometimes call it the jelly bean rule. The idea that a company should not be able to dump vitamins into junk food and then sell it as nutritious. You cannot sprinkle some vitamin C onto a candy bar and market it as health food. The lawsuit argued that Vitaminwater was doing essentially that, just in liquid form. In 2010, the case hit a critical moment. Coca-Cola asked the judge to throw the lawsuit out. The judge, John Gleason, refused, and his reasoning cut right to the heart of the brand. He noted that the very name Vitaminwater, along with flavor names like Defense and Revive, had the potential to reinforce a consumer's mistaken belief that the product was made of nothing but vitamins and water, conveniently leaving out the single biggest ingredient after water: sugar. He also found that using the word healthy on the label may have violated the FDA's own rules, because the drink did not meet the nutritional thresholds required to make that kind of claim. But the moment that turned this from a routine lawsuit into a marketing legend came from Coca-Cola's own defense. In court, the company's lawyers argued that no consumer could reasonably be misled into thinking Vitaminwater was a healthy beverage. Their logic was that the sweet taste alone should tip people off that it contained sugar. Read that again, because it is extraordinary. To defend itself, the most sophisticated marketing company in the world was effectively arguing that no reasonable person should ever have believed its marketing in the first place. The company had spent a fortune teaching people that vitamin water was healthy. And now, in front of a judge, it was insisting that anyone who fell for that was being unreasonable. Critics had a field day, as more than one of them asked, exactly how many tens of millions of dollars had Coca-Cola spent trying to mislead consumers? If those consumers supposedly could not be misled at all. You might assume a confession like that would sink the brand. It didn't. And how the case actually ended is, in its own way, the most revealing part of the whole story. The lawsuit dragged on for 6 full years. Finally, in 2016, a federal court approved a settlement, and Coca-Cola settled without admitting any wrongdoing. On paper, the consumer advocates won. The company agreed to stop making a list of specific claims, including lines like vitamins plus water equals all you need, and the suggestions that the drink could improve immune function or protect your eyes. It also agreed to add the words with sweeteners in 2 places on the label, right near the brand name, and to display the calorie count more prominently. So a bottle now announces it's roughly 120 calories, a little more, honestly. But look closer at what Coca-Cola did not have to give up. It did not pay a cent in damages to the consumers who'd bought the product, only around $2.5 million to the plaintiff's lawyers. It got to keep calling the drink vitamin water. It got to keep the flavor names, Defense, Revive, and all the rest. It got to keep describing it as a nutrient-enhanced water beverage. In other words, the company added a couple of small, honest words to the label and walked away with its single most valuable asset fully intact: the name itself. Because the name does the persuading. The word vitamin water plants vitamins and water in your head and quietly hides the sugar. No slogan required. Some watchdog groups complained that the settlement barely changed anything at all. And in terms of the brand's real power, they had a point. Today, vitamin water is still on the shelf. It is still a brand worth around $1 billion a year. The lawsuit, the courtroom confession, the embarrassing headlines, none of it meaningfully dented sales. The illusion was simply too well built to break. So what is the real lesson here for anyone trying to understand how modern brands actually work? Vitamin water was never really selling water, and it certainly was not selling vitamins. It was selling permission. Permission to drink sugar and feel virtuous doing it. That feeling was worth $4 billion, and it was so valuable that even being forced to undercut it in open court could not destroy it. And if that playbook sounds familiar, it should. Walk down any aisle today and you will see it everywhere, in every product promising immunity, energy, balance, or all natural goodness, wrapped around ingredients that tell a very different story. Vitamin water did not just build an empire on the health halo. It wrote the playbook everyone else copied. If you want to see that same kind of trick pulled on an even grander scale, the next video unpacks a brand that convinced millions of people to pay a fortune for something they could have gotten almost for free. Thanks for watching.